Hey Bears fans, NFL free agency is here. The legal tampering period has begun, which means this is the time to subscribe if you haven't already, because we're going to cover every single move the Bears make during NFL free agency. Hit that big red button and subscribe. Let's continue to grow this channel. Hey, the rumors, the news, they're not going away. If anything, they're picking up now that free agency is here. So go ahead and subscribe today. You're watching Chicago Bears Now by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Harrison Graham. Lots of rumors and news to discuss, especially when it comes to Russell Wilson. Is the clock ticking on a Russell Wilson trade? I'm going to go 3 Smokin' Jays on this one. 3 Smokin' Jays on our Smokin' Jay rumor meter means it's pretty likely. It's not 100%, but 3 Smokin' Jays means that, yeah, the clock is ticking, I would say. It's not running out, but it's starting to tick, that's for sure. With the legal tampering window officially open, teams got to figure out what they're doing at certain positions, and the Chicago Bears are obviously the biggest question mark team in the NFL when it comes to their future at quarterback. Now, I won't give it 4 Smokin' Jays, which would mean, yeah, the clock's ticking, it's almost run out, because what are their other options, right? Are they going to be like, oh, we got to give up on Russ because the Seahawks are taking too long, we got to go sign Ryan Fitzpatrick before he gets scooped up? I'm not really going there, but time is starting to at least lessen a little bit here now that free agency is here. I think the Seahawks need to decide and sit down with Russell Wilson, hey, are we going to make this work or not? I think this is more about Seattle than anything. Like, how serious is the friction there? Does Wilson want out? Does he want to play in Chicago? Because the other teams that were listed don't really make sense anymore. The Saints are going to go with Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, it looks like. The Cowboys re-signed Dak Prescott. And the Raiders, I think they're out of the running at this point as well, which means, okay, Russ, sit down with Seattle and say, hey, I want to make this work or I don't. You need to make a decision. Both those parties do. And at that point, the Bears can know, okay, this is worth staying in this race or not. Will Seattle trade for Wilson? What do you guys think at this point? You know, we're a couple weeks into these rumors floating around the NFL at this point, and free agency's here now. So type Y for yes, type N for no. Will Seattle trade Russell Wilson? Now, there's certainly a lot circulating from several different sources, so let's just read through a few quotes here. Ian Rapoport says, Seahawks GM John Schneider, he'll always listen. He's never going to hang up the phone. But it doesn't sound like he's engaged in any real conversation, so when teams like the Bears make it clear they are interested in Russell Wilson, Seattle hasn't really reciprocated. This comes off of what Jeremy Fowler said on Sunday, saying, hey, expectation is that Chicago is going to take a big swing at getting Russell. Now, Seattle has given no indication that they are going to trade him, but Russell Wilson himself does not expect to be traded, but Chicago is going to try to make that change and put together a package. And then Louis Riddick, I'm prepared for something big to happen. So does anyone really know anything? I think there's chatter. I think there's murmurs. It's rumors SZN that's about to turn into news SZN with free agency officially here now. But I think at this point in time, only Seattle and Russell Wilson really know what's going on. I'm sure the Bears front office has an indication of where things sit, I'm sure, with the Seattle Seahawks, but we actually don't even have anything official in terms of if a trade offer has been made from the Chicago Bears. We think they've called. It's possible they've made an offer, but we actually don't have any official report saying that that is the case. I think the Bears are going to try. I think they're desperate to land a franchise quarterback, but after that, how much do we really know? We know that there's interest. We know that there's some friction in Seattle. That's about it. That's kind of where we sit at this point. So with free agency here, clock is starting to tick, but it hasn't completely reached the point where the Bears need to move in a different direction. But I will say the next 48, 72, 100 hours, pretty critical for if a Russell Wilson trade is going to happen. So how much is Russell Wilson worth in a trade? Send in your best trade ideas right now down in the comment section. I want to hear from you guys. How much is he worth? And then go ahead and send in your ideas down below. Today's show presented by Bet Rivers. March Madness is here, and there is money to be made, good value on some upset type of teams. I loved some of the juicy 12-5 matchups this year. Bet Georgetown over Colorado in that 12-5 matchup. Chatsports.com/betil, chatsports.com/betin. Bet Rivers is the place to go to make some money during March Madness. The first 4 play-in games begin on Wednesday, I believe, then the real tournament gets going on Thursday for those play-in matchups, I should say, with the actual tournament starting on Friday. I cannot wait. Chatsports.com/betin, chatsports.com/betil. You must be within the state of Indiana or Illinois to place a bet, but you can sign up and deposit from anywhere. Get that 100% deposit match with Bet Rivers and make some money during March Madness. Oh, we've reached the bad take of the day. How about trading Khalil Mack for Russell Wilson? Fake news on this one. Last week we talked about this, and it was like, yeah, I'd be willing to do that, but the Bears have restructured Khalil Mack, so he's virtually impossible to trade now. This one comes from our good friend Dan Orlovsky. I like his film work, but this is not. This is a little out of his realm for Dirty Dan there. He proposed a 3-team trade in which Chicago would land Russell Wilson and send out Khalil Mack as a part of the trade. We'll show the trade in just a moment. But again, this makes no sense because the Bears just restructured Khalil Mack's contract, which means trading him is now pretty much impossible. It's not 100% impossible, but they're not going to trade him. I'll just leave it at that. And that's not even the main thing that's wrong with this trade, I don't think, although you could argue it is. But there's about 5 things wrong here. Sure, getting Russell Wilson is great, and this is not my trade. This is Dirty Dan again, Dan Orlovsky there. Sam Darnold and 3 first-round picks to the Seahawks. By the way, doesn't include the number 2 overall pick from the Jets, so why does that make sense for Seattle? But okay, sure. Then this part, Khalil Mack again, basically untradeable. Kyle Fuller, who is tradable, or Allen Robinson, which, remember, Russell Wilson has a no-trade clause, and why is he approving a trade to Chicago if Allen Robinson isn't there? That doesn't make any sense. And then, let's just throw in a second-round pick to the Jets, which, by the way, he didn't indicate which team that was coming from either. So there's a lot of weird things going on here. Does this make sense for any team on here? This trade makes no sense. And again, I want to circle back to the point that the Bears aren't trading Khalil Mack. As soon as they restructured his contract and made it a signing bonus to get under the salary cap threshold, that basically became impossible. Why? Because his cap hit, if you trade him or cut him, is now $39 million. It's one thing for that to be a quarterback like Russell Wilson, but you're not going to trade a defensive player and lose like $20 million in dead cap money. That's just not going to be the case for the Chicago Bears. He will be in Chicago this next season. This is fake news. I'm not completely bodying Dan Orlovsky because I like some of his work, but maybe ESPN should not have him try to put together trade proposals without understanding the cap implications and how some of those things work. So, that's not going to happen at this point. Doesn't mean they can't trade for him, but Khalil Mack, he's not going to be a part of it. How many sacks for Khalil Mack in 2021? I want to hear from you guys. Go ahead and predict. He had 9 last year. How about double digits? I think Sean Desai will get him back into that 10-plus range. Go ahead and predict it for me in the comment section. Is a Mitchell Trubisky reunion not dead with the Chicago Bears? One smoking J on this one when it comes to a Trubisky reunion with Chicago. Reports are out there when it comes to Mitch Trubisky on his future in free agency. ESPN reported, hey, the Bears plan to let Trubisky go, and then Mike Florio countered that with, Chicago hasn't really ruled out a return. So let's talk about it for the next few minutes here on Chicago Bears Now. The Bears QB situation continues to be in flux. We certainly know that. But I'm only going to go one smoking J, which means it's pretty unlikely because what is the upside of bringing back Mitchell Trubisky? Now, there certainly could be an approach from Chicago's side of, hey, maybe we kind of drag him along in free agency, and he's our insurance policy if we swing and miss on a bunch of guys. Doesn't Mitch Trubisky have a little bit more self-worth than that? Like, are you just going to agree to Chicago being like, hey, just wait and see if we swing and miss on Russell Wilson and Deshaun and all these other guys, and hey, you can come back and perhaps start next year if those things happen? Like, I guess from his side of view, it could be like, well, I probably can't start anywhere else, so yeah, I guess I'll agree to that, but I don't think it makes sense. I guess the Bears could view it this way, but I tend to think that these two parties have moved on. And certainly the Bears are going to swing at these guys first. Like, they're going to continue to go after Russell Wilson. They're going to circle to Deshaun Watson if Wilson doesn't work. I think Darnold and Jimmy Garoppolo are options they're going to want to consider before circling back to a guy like Mitchell Trubisky. And even then, do you want to do that? You have Nick Foles. He can be your stopgap quarterback. You can focus on the draft if that ends up happening. I just think that I won't completely rule it out. That's why it's the one smoking Jay, but I think it's very, very unlikely that Mitch is back in Chicago in 2021. What would your one-word reaction be if the Bears brought back Trubisky? Just one word. Let me know what you guys think on this one. I would be surprised. That's my one word, but go ahead and get your thoughts on this one. And again, I just think the Trubisky experiment is over. We've seen it play out. We've seen what happens. He can look good at times, especially against bad teams. You know, he gets some mojo going. Maserati Mitch gets on the edge, and he's throwing on the run, and you're like, where did that come from? And then he plays against a good team, and he's just not very effective. I've seen enough of this. I'm ready to move on. I think most of you guys are as well. I know there's this niche crowd that loves Mitch Trubisky and thinks it's all on the coaching staff. And look, the coaches aren't blameless necessarily, but you've started almost 50 games if you're Mitch Trubisky. You've had opportunities to get it done at a high level, and he just hadn't been good enough, and that's fine. It just means it's time to move on. It's time for him to go to a new team, and it's time for the Bears to try someone else at quarterback. I've got no interest. Even if you swing and miss on guys, go draft somebody. Like, let's try something new if you are the Chicago Bears. So what you think? Fill in the blank on this one. The Bears' 2021 quarterback will be blank. I want to hear from you guys. Who will be the Bears' starting quarterback in 2021? Subscribe and join us. I want to remind you guys, we will be live on Tuesday, normally 4 o'clock Eastern, which, if nothing crazy happens, that'll still be the plan, I believe. But with free agency, the legal tampering period here, if something big drops, maybe we'll go live later. Could get pushed back a little bit depending on what happens here at Chat Sports. Remember, Bears now is a part of the Chat Sports network on YouTube. If crazy news happens with other teams, I could be preoccupied on our main channel as well. We'll be live at some point, just don't know when. That's why you need to subscribe, turn on notifications. That way you know exactly when we go live. And before we sign off, we'll start mixing this in on most of our shows here, the free agency tracker, where we sit. These are guys the Bears brought back over the weekend. Kicker and punter are back. Cairo Santos, Pat O'Donnell. We don't know the details on O'Donnell's deal yet. We just know it's 1 year, probably the vet minimum. And then Mario Edwards, 3 years, $11.5 million there, with I believe $8 or $9 million guaranteed. Bears rewarding him for playing pretty well last season. Remember, 2-game suspension to start 2021 for violating the PED substance abuse policy. So keep that in mind. As more players sign, we'll cover it here on Chicago Bears Now.